Klein. Okay.
Hello and
Frank,
welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for the Career Path series on business development. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to MBA Director Ernie Silvers, who will be conducting an interview with Frank Clement, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships for America's Christian Credit Union. Over to you, Ernie.
thank you so much. I'm glad we get all that fun stuff out of the way before we started recording, Molly. Frank, I'm happy to have you here. Thanks for pitching in on short notice. Thanks for being here, Frank.
Thank you so much. And I'm sorry to everyone who was hoping for internal audit as a topic of conversation. I don't do that.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Oh my goodness. So Frank, you work with a credit union, and you help us understand what exactly is a credit union, difference between credit union and the bank. Help know what are those differences?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And again, thank you for allowing me to be here. This is a great opportunity and appreciate this chance to just share a little bit about what I do. So I work at America's Christian Credit Union, and credit unions in most ways are a lot like banks. They offer generally the same services, checking and savings accounts, car loans, home loans, things like that. But a key difference between credit unions and banks is that credit unions are actually nonprofit entities. So they're nonprofit financial cooperatives, and they represent a particular community. And some of the earliest credit unions to be formed back in, like the 1930s were for farmers. And so a lot of times you'd have farmers who maybe needed new farm equipment, new tractor or whatever, and they'd go into town to the banks, and the banks would be giving them, really, really high interest rates on these loans for the farming equipment. And of course, farming in particular is such an uncertain business. You never know when the crop is going to turn out well or badly. And so what these farmers did was, they said, instead of getting a 25% loan for a new tractor from the bank in town, I'm going to go ahead and work with the other farmers in my community, and we will just pool our resources. And when one of us, has a need for some capital, we can lend that capital to that person, but at a much more reasonable rate, because we're kind of all in this together. And so that's one of the earliest examples of some credit unions that popped up here in the U.S. And so credit unions, like I said, they represent a community. You'll often see credit unions that are tied to a particular employer. So like Boeing, for instance, will have a credit union. You have Navy Federal Credit Union, which serves people who are in or were in the Navy. And then for us in particular, we exist to serve organizations within the faith-based nonprofit space, as well as the individuals who are attached to those.
That is pretty cool. When you were talking about folks and similar industries getting together, the term co-op came to mind. Does that co-op back in the early day? Maybe we don't use that so much anymore. You
Yeah.
familiar with co-op?
Like, is that co-op with a capital C, or co-op as like a general idea?
I don't really know. It's just I've heard what you described as the folks getting together, because I've heard the
Yeah.
story from a farmer. Farmers got together and did that. They put
Yep.
their monies
Mm-hmm.
together, and they loaned to one another. Um,
Yep.
I don't normally think of a credit union as a business lending entity. That's fabulous.
Yep.
Is that unique to your institution, or is that all credit unions?
It really depends on the particular community that credit union serves.
Okay.
So all credit unions, they have what's called a field of membership, and it's a really interesting idea because in a sense, legally credit unions are required to discriminate, which nowadays that sounds very harsh to
Wait,
our
what?
ears, but I know, and we're recording. My apologies. Talk to the federal government if you have a problem. So our credit union, we have bylaws that stipulate who qualifies for membership, and that's true for every credit union. So you'll have credit unions that serve anybody who, they'll say that anyone who lives, works, or worships within, this county or within this city, or anybody who's an employee of this company or is a family member of an employee. And so these credit unions exist to serve that field of membership. And so if that field of membership has specific commercial needs, then that credit union will generally have services that are appropriate for the commercial needs within that community. And so, as our name might indicate, we serve a lot of churches, homeless shelters, these faith-based nonprofits where it's an actual organization, right? And so they need corporate banking, and they might, maybe they're building a new facility, and so they need a multi-million-dollar construction loan, which we would be able to provide. So for us, about half of our work is on that commercial side where we're serving organizations, and then the other half is serving individuals with their car loans and mortgages and things like that.
You guys are, really a full service entity then. Can anybody belong to your credit union?
Uh, so no, going back to my
No.
statement before, yeah, I know it's terrible. It's terrible. Again, write your
No.
congressperson and complain.
I
So
gotta complain.
we have a list of, I mean, it's literally hundreds. There are hundreds of faith-based nonprofits that would qualify for membership. And then if you have an attachment, so let's say maybe you're involved with a homeless outreach organization that gets together on Saturdays to hand out sack lunches or something like that. You could potentially qualify through your volunteering with that organization to be able to join the credit union.
Mhm.
But like every credit union, when you seek membership, we have a process where we say, how do you qualify for membership here at the credit union? And if we get too lax with that, our regulators say, whoa, 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 you get special tax benefits for serving a specific community. You are going outside of that community that you say you exist to serve. You're acting an awful lot like a bank. And so that's
Oh,
where we have to be
okay.
careful to preserve our tax status and that nonprofit status that we have.
That's cool. Okay, I got you. So, you are director of strategic partnerships. Help us. What does your job look like? What does that mean? You're out hunting new candidate B members?
Yeah, yeah.
Or,
It's a lot of business development,
okay.
and it's we talk within our walls, and we didn't invent this idea, but we talk a lot about this idea of one to many. So we are, we don't have the kind of budget that a Bank of America or a Wells Fargo would have, and so we can't sponsor the Super Bowl or pay for a professional athletic stadium or something like that. And so we have to be very strategic in terms of how we spend our marketing dollars in order to reach people, let them know that we're there, that we can serve them. And so we're always looking for opportunities to use sort of like an umbrella organization or an association to be able to reach either other organizations or to reach individuals that would qualify for membership with the credit union. And so a lot of my work then is trying to find those channel partnerships where, for instance, we work with a network of Christian schools across the country, K-12 Christian schools. And so,
Mhm.
we have an agreement with them that any teacher at any of those schools would qualify for membership at the credit union, and they help us advertise that to the teachers. And so now you have these schools handing out flyers to teachers saying, here are all the wonderful benefits of banking with America's Christian Credit Union. And so identifying ways to work with these strategic partners to get our information out to the folks who would be interested in it, so that we're not, trying to reach everybody through ubiquitous marketing, but just, sort of leveraging relationships to be able to reach people, with sort of the lowest cost possible while still having that impact.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. So, you're in banking and the banking industry.
Mm-hmm.
We have a unique opportunity with inflation and interest rates and so forth. If you pull out your crystal, what do things look like for you guys going forward? We talked earlier before we came on about, in there, and you've seen very low interest rates all of a sudden turn
Yeah.
into high interest rates. But
Mm-hmm.
for you girls at home, I can tell you my first house mortgage rate was at 14%. So you nothing yet. They're complaining about, what is it, 7 point something now. So, but what's in the in the world of economy, Brian?
Yeah. It's an interesting moment for sure. And, if this is any consolation, it doesn't even seem like Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve knows what's going on. So, in that sense, we're all kind of in the dark, but, we're starting to see, whether these are unintended consequences, I can't say because I wasn't invited to the meeting, but, you look at what's happening with interest rates rising as quickly as they did. You're seeing people. So for instance, someone might have gotten into a house 2 years ago and gotten a 3% interest rate on their mortgage, right? And now if they were to buy a new house, home prices haven't come down, but interest rates have gone up. And so to buy a house for the same amount of money now, they might be looking at $1,000 more a month in interest costs on that mortgage, right? And so you have people who are staying put. They're saying, I'm not leaving this house, right? I got this house. I got a great interest rate on my mortgage. I'm not moving. And that's one of the reasons that there's so few houses for sale, and which consequently is why home prices have not come down. And so that's one thing that we're seeing. And so there are a lot of people who would love to buy a house if they could, but there aren't very many for sale. So then for us, we don't do realty, we do mortgages. And so if there are just simply no houses to buy, then people aren't coming to us for mortgages. And so as great as the interest rates would be for us, who doesn't like the idea of having a 30-year mortgage that we could lock in at 7.5%, for us, I mean, that's how we make money. And so that's an exciting opportunity. And yet people aren't buying houses because there are no houses to buy. And so that's one thing that we're seeing. And then also, and this is not proprietary information, but as inflation bites and as, some of the stimulus money that was flowing during COVID has worn off, people are starting to spend their savings down and now even tap into things like credit cards or lines of credit that they might have opened. And so people are relying more on debt. And of course, this is starting to feel a little bit like 2008. And so there is, for us as a financial institution that, we're committed to the well-being of our members. There is this a little bit of anxiety about, how are our consumers doing? How are they holding up? And are we going to start seeing a wave of defaults where people say, I can't pay my car loan back. I can't make payments on my mortgage right now. There are just too many competing expenses in my life. So we're definitely feeling the pressure. And then, for us, something that we're experiencing too is sort of a shortage of liquidity. And this is true across the banking sector. So, people can buy treasuries from the government, which are, as close to guaranteed as you can get. And they're buying these things at 5.5%, oftentimes in very short, like for 1 or 2 or 3 months. So they're getting a great return on their money. And so then all of a sudden the idea of leaving their money in a savings account that might only be getting 2 or 3% doesn't sound so good. And so banks across the country, banks and credit unions are seeing huge outflows of savings and even, balances in checking accounts as people seek a higher return elsewhere. But since that is the fuel that we use to make loans to people, as we run short on liquidity, we have to start turning people away for loans, not because they don't qualify, but because, now we have to be more judicious in how we lend those deposits out.
Yeah. If you don't have money, you can't. Oh my goodness. So this is pretty crazy. So
Yeah.
how did you, all right, backstory on Frank. He was in academia for a while in administration at Georgetown University and Azusa Pacific. And then he had an enlightenment and decided to get a real job. How did you get to the banking world, Frank? How did that happen?
Well, so America's Christian Credit Union is just down the road from Azusa Pacific, and about half the people who work there went to APU. And so as my time at APU was wrapping up, I was finishing my master's degree there. I was enjoying working there, but, I think when you come to the end of an academic program, sometimes it's a natural point to step back and say, how do I want to apply the learning that I've just, gathered? And so, and I guess this is also just sort of highlights the importance of networks and your school networks. And so I was able to meet some people who I'd never met before, but because we both had an Azusa Pacific connection, it's sort of like you can email these people and say, hey, I want to meet with you. And they sort of have to say yes because you went to the same college. And that's just the rules of the world for some reason. But I throw that out as an encouragement to all of you that, as you come to the end of your program, if you're on LinkedIn, let's say, and you see that someone went to CSUSB, message them. Like there's an unspoken code that they should respond to you and at least give you, 30 minutes of their time. And so even if you're just having informational interviews, because that's how it started for me was, I was looking at the credit union and I thought, I've always been interested in finance, but I've never worked in it and I've never even learned about it. I mean, my master's is in organizational psychology, so it's not quite an MBA. But I was interested. And so I reached out. I said, I'd like to learn more about what you do at the credit union. And as I learned about it, I just, it struck me as I love the impact that you're having, right? It's finance, but it's finance to support organizations that have a really great mission. And I love that. And so I want to be a part of that however I can. And they don't let me near the spreadsheets. They know that I'd be too dangerous if I was using real numbers, but, I love that I get to go around and talk about what we do and how we can support organizations and individuals within that field of membership.
Okay, so you're a people person then. That's your deal, right? Person.
Yeah, it's true. Guilty.
Yeah, not a finance guy. So you're human instead. I like that part.
That's right. I'm not AI.
I'm not AI. Oh, there. That was a bad
My wife would
conversation.
say
You
I'm
don't
not
want to.
even I.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Okay, that is cool. So talk about we've got MBAs here.
Yeah.
banking and finance, is that an opportunity that we could consider? Talk to my students here about that. How do they get
Yeah.
involved? I think that's the biggest question I get is how do I get involved? And beyond what
Hmm.
you just say, look for alums, look for people, look at the association, reach out. What's
Yeah.
banking and finance look like, folks just wanting to get in?
Sure. Well, I mean, if you're anything like me, which maybe you're not, but I'm very much drawn to a mission. And when you look across the country, I mean, there are literally thousands of banks and credit unions, right? And they all have checking accounts and savings accounts and car loans and home loans. And so, in one sense, it's kind of like, well, what difference does it make, right? But I would say, as you are working your way through your MBA program, if you're attracted to the idea of working with a particular community, making an impact somewhere, the cool thing about banking is it really does, like, banking creates the opportunity to slingshot individuals and organizations forward, right? So you think about, for pretty much, I don't know, at least the last 100 years, home ownership was the ticket to the middle class. If you could
Yeah.
find a way to buy a house, then as the value of your house increased, your net worth increased, right? And even if you got a 15 or 20 or 30-year mortgage on it, you're paying down your mortgage and the value of that house is going up. And the difference between what it's worth and what you owe on it, your equity in that house, literally becomes part of your net worth. And so there are people who, they went from renting long term to finally being able to pull together a down payment to get a mortgage to buy a house. And all of a sudden their financial picture and that of their children and their children's children completely changes. And the same can be true for organizations, both businesses and nonprofits, where, strategic borrowing in order to grow can make all the difference. And we saw that there's a school that we work with up in Oregon, and they, it actually sort of started with a crisis, but it's ended really well for them. So they had really bad water damage to their gymnasium, and they had to fix it. They had to. There was like no, they had to fix it. So they got a contractor, and the contractor said, "I tell you what, I will advance some short-term financing to you." Just to get you through the project. And then once we're done the construction, you'll just take that loan and you can refinance it with your regular bank. And the school thought, oh, that's great. That's wonderful. You're helping us out. Right. And then we're talking like double-digit interest, but they're thinking, well, we'll only have this loan for, 6 months to a year, and then we'll refinance it into something much more reasonable. So then the dust is settled. They have a beautiful brand new gymnasium and this double-digit interest loan. And they go to their regular bank and they say, we'd like to refinance this into a standard loan. And their bank, like, basically laughed them out of the room. They're like, absolutely not. You don't qualify for any kind of a refinance. This is ridiculous. They ended up going to 5 different commercial lenders in town, and they got turned down by every single one of them. And so now they're like, well, shoot, like the monthly costs of this financing that we have is unsustainable, right? We are like dipping into our reserves just to make these payments, and we can't get out of it. We can't extend it into something longer where the monthly payments are lower. And then they heard about us, and we took a look at their finances, and we said, well, we understand why you got turned down. You are kind of in a rough spot, but we want to coach you through this. We want to actually see you succeed. And so we gave them some steps that they needed to take, some milestones that they had to hit. They went away. They came back 4 months later. They'd hit every single one of those milestones. And we said, okay, you did your part. Now we're going to do our part. And we offered them a 25-year loan, which in commercial lending is pretty uncommon. Usually commercial loans don't go past 20 years, but we said, we'll extend it to 25 years so that your monthly payments are lower, so that they fit within your budget. So this won't be, a crippling debt. And so they were able to get that loan. Their financial picture completely turned around. We are now doing a third loan with them. They were able to buy the property next door, and now they're doubling the size of their campus, able to reach more students in the community. And it's all because they used debt. They were working with us, with a sympathetic financial partner who was interested in seeing them succeed. And then they used debt in order to propel them towards growth instead of, waiting to save up that money. Even if they did a fundraiser, it would have probably taken them 10 years to get that amount of money versus borrowing it now and paying it back over time. So I guess all that to say, if you're thinking that banking might be of interest, I guess the question if I were you, I'd ask myself, what's an area of the world that I'd like to help improve, because good financing can make a huge difference. And so there's that. And then in terms of, the different specialties that you might be building up through your MBA career, obviously I'm a people person. I love to talk to folks, and you start asking me details and I kind of freak out. But as long as we can keep it high level, we're good. But there, we have other people in our organization who, when somebody says, okay, I need a loan for this or that, right? They start going through the nitty gritty. They say, we need to see, your last 3 years of complete financial statements. We need to see this year's budget. We need to see next year's budget if you have it. We need to see your statement of accounts. Now we're going through all of this, and we're going to give you some options, right? We're going to tell you, you can get this period of a loan, right? It might be a 15-year loan with a lower interest rate, or you can get a longer term with a higher interest rate. And these are the monthly payments. And you have to decide for your organization or for your family, if it's an individual loan, you decide what makes more sense and what's going to help you. And, we can offer some insights on the differences, but ultimately it's your decision, but we want to present you with good information. So the people who love to crunch those numbers, who can say, well, we can get creative here and we can stretch this out, or we can, if you bring a little bit more down payment at the front end, then you don't have to borrow as much, and then that won't be as much of a strain on your cash flow. And so there, people who can run those numbers and help with the loan underwriting. You were going to hear from our internal auditor. So there are people who are responsible for helping make sure that we remain true to our policies and procedures. And so not only are we're federally regulated, so we have to comply with federal regulation, of course, but also we have our own internal documents that we generate, often with the help of external consultants. But once we have those documents, we are required to adhere to our own documents. And so then if a regulator were to come in for one of our routine examinations and say, you said that every time, somebody comes to you for this product, you're going to run them through this process, but I'm looking at your documentation and like half the time you did not do that at all. Why? And if we can't give them a good answer, and if we didn't explain why we were making exceptions, left, right, and center, that becomes a finding. That becomes, we're in trouble. And so having an internal auditor then is a way to check ourselves before the regulators come in. And so if our internal auditor says, whoa, I was going through the new member department, and I was seeing that, they are routinely not following their own written procedures. Well, now we can do something about it before the regulators come in. And so we're just all on the same page and making sure that we're complying both with our internal documents as well as, the regulatory documents that the federal and state government hands down.
Yeah, that's interesting. You're talking like that. I immediately thought that is very much what our AAC accreditation process looks like, right? With same thing. We have an internal audit process that you are, as an institution, and Cal State is one of a very small of schools that are accredited by AACSB. We too have to do our own internal and live by our own rules, right? We set the rules. We say, this is how we're going to treat students. This is how we're going to process. This is our accreditation process, and we have to do the same thing. So that's what I related to.
Yeah.
So I like that. You almost sound like a business coach or a some sort of a consultant, maybe entrepreneurial to a certain extent when you're dealing with people trying to help them solve issues. What role do you see yourself? You're almost a psychologist. I see you've got the IO psych thing going on, so you're almost there, doctor. What role are you playing with master? Yes, sir. Sorry, I forgot about that. Yeah. Can't call you doctor, Frank.
Not a doctor. Maybe someday.
Not a doctor.
Well, I appreciate that question. And so for instance, what we saw, within our field of membership, within our community that we serve, there has been a growing interest in Christian K-12 education. So more families are having their kids go to, a local church school or something like that, right? And so we said, well, okay, that's within our field of membership. That's if there are needs there, we are positioned to address those. And so I had the opportunity to go out and really just do a lot of fact finding. So understanding, if you're running a private school, what are the opportunities, but are also what are some of the headwinds that you're facing? And something really interesting that we came to learn through that exploration after talking to dozens of school leaders was that they have I call it the tuition dilemma. So essentially, they know how much tuition they need to charge to cover their costs, and most families who are sending their kids to one of these schools are not in a position to pay that tuition up front. And so then the school says, well, I tell you what, you can have a monthly payment plan, and as long as you pay us back over the course of 10 months, we're all good. Everything's fine, right? Now, the thing, though, about a seat in a private school is that, if a family 1 month into the school year said, we don't want to be here anymore, the chances of the school turning around and filling that seat with another student are pretty slim. So it's essentially a perishable good, right? So they are letting people pay over 10 months for something that after the first few weeks of school basically no longer has value on the secondary market, if you want to look at it that way. And so then if you think about it that way, the school is extending credit, right? By giving that monthly installment plan, they are extending credit, but they're not a bank. They're not a credit union. They're not running credit. They don't have a way to really assess a family's ability to repay that payment plan. And then if a family falls behind, the school does its best to try to recover that tuition. But they don't, they can't call up Experian or Equifax and say, that Ernie Silvers, he's not paying his bills. He signed on the dotted line, said he was going to pay, but now he's not paying. They don't have that at their disposal. And sometimes they'll bring in external collections companies to try to recover, a couple of $1,000s in tuition, but it's a real challenge. And so in hearing all that, I said, well, that's just a personal loan. And we do those all day, every day. It's just a personal loan. And so we now have a number of schools that we serve with our tuition financing where these schools say, we're tired of playing bank. We're tired of extending credit to people in the form of a payment plan and then consistently either losing money or having to pay a staff member who does nothing but collect tuition. We're just going to offload that because that's not why we exist. We're here to teach the kids. We're not here to collect money. And so the families who need that flexibility come to us and get a tuition loan. The school's getting full tuition up front, and then the family still has access to that monthly flexibility through their partnership with us. And so that was in talking to these schools and understanding what's a major pain point. Oh, it's collecting tuition. I mean, your revenue source is primarily tuition and you're struggling to collect it. As a business, like you're going to run out of steam pretty soon if you don't resolve that. And so that's a way for us to come alongside and work with the school, work with the families, and create a much more sustainable model. So that was a chance to, bring our credit union hat, to the table and kind of say, okay, this is how we look at the problem. And if that sounds good to you, maybe we can work together to make this better.
So didn't they really just sort of transfer their burden to you?
Yep. Exactly.
I like that idea. Let's do that.
But we're equipped to handle in a way that your typical private K-12 school is not. So yeah.
Support the institution. So do you working in that arena of private schools and so forth, are more and more parents, aren't they becoming very popular these days? Folks pulling their kids from public schools and putting them in private institutions. So they should be doing quite well. Is that true?
They are. Yes.
Okay.
At least, the schools that we've been talking to, we are seeing increased enrollment. And also there are now 30 states that have some kind of a voucher program that can be used at a private school. And so that's the other really interesting X factor. So for a while, you had the charter movement was really exploding because, people could send their kids to an alternative school that was being funded by the state. Well, now with these voucher programs, I don't think California will ever have a voucher program, but every other state, Arizona, for instance, Florida just got one, North Carolina. And so what we're seeing is these schools, their income is a lot more assured because, at least a significant portion is being paid by the state. And so these schools now, they're bursting at the seams and they're coming to us and they're saying, we have waiting lists for almost every grade. We could bring in more students. We just don't have the space. And so again, for us as a financial institution, it's like, well, we live for this stuff. Well, let's get you a construction loan so that you can expand your campus or buy a property next door and build that out and be able to bring in more students and then receive the state vouchers through those students. So yeah, it is it's definitely a boom. And I mean, we'll see what happens over time, but right now there's a lot of growth there.
Right. And then do you also, because you're handling the institution, the parents that are now paying tuition to you or through you now becoming clients as well?
Yeah, exactly. So when they come to us for tuition financing, we're getting members.
There's a plot here.
But I would say, Ernie, this is, well, this, but this is business development, right? When you can find, for instance, like you go to the Ford dealership, right? And you're going to buy a car and they're excited to sell you the car, but they're also excited to get you a car loan, right? And so they're really selling you on two products. They're selling you a vehicle and they're getting you into their financing and they're earning interest off of you because most people aren't in a position to buy a car cash. And so
Right.
the same deal, in my work, I'm always looking for, what does that captive audience look like? Where could we come in and ingrain ourselves in the business model so that essentially, like, when people want to take an action, it involves becoming a member of our credit union and taking on some kind of a product or service that we provide.
I like it. Yeah. This is, I never even knew existed. I love it. I
So
love
I,
it.
I actually have a question for you, a little bit more
Yeah.
high level. For those who are interested in potentially exploring a career in business development, strategic partnerships.
Yeah.
So what are the skills and abilities that that career choice would require, in your opinion,
Mm-hmm.
since you're in that role?
Sure. Yeah. When I think what Ernie said a moment ago kind of hit the nail on the head, in terms of I guess I do think of myself a little bit as a consultant. Now I have to be careful because I don't have a fiduciary responsibility for these people. And so I can't necessarily tell them what to do. But it really, in the way I look at it, is it's all about solving problems, right? So if
Mhm.
I talk to 5 people who all run nonprofit organizations and I hear all 5 people talk about the same pain point, I look at that and I say, okay, hold on, there might be an opportunity here. Is there a way for us as a financial institution to come in and address that, solve it for the organization, help that organization reduce some friction, and be able to have more impact in the work that they're doing? And then, yes, now we got more members. We have, more organizations or individuals who are banking with us. And so if you can look at it in terms of, I want to solve someone's problem. So I'm going to look for someone who has a problem. I'm going to see if we can present a solution to that problem so that they will say yes to, the services that we're selling, right? Like, I'm selling membership to the credit union essentially. And so if by becoming a member of the credit union and taking advantage of a product or service we offer, it solves your problem, everybody's happy. We've all won, right? It's not like we're getting members at the expense of someone's success or happiness. We literally, they should be doing better as a result of that relationship. And so I'd say, having that problem solving mentality, like looking for those
Mhm.
problems out there, where is there a hole that's not filled? And again, there are thousands of banks and credit unions. So if you say we're going to have the best car loan, it's like, what does that mean? Right. And this is, Ernie will know this way better than I. So, the 5 Ps of marketing, right? It's like, but who is that best car loan for, right? Because there are so many different people in so many different situations. So you might say, I'm going to try to solve the car loan problem for a specific kind of consumer in a specific market, whether it's a geographic region or maybe folks who are after a certain kind of car, but like identifying that niche where I think that there's an opportunity here. No one else seems to be addressing this. And if I do it, then even though there are thousands of banks and credit unions out there, we're going to be the ones who have first, bite of the apple because we came with a solution to the problem.
It sounds a little
Yeah.
bit like entrepreneurial thinking.
Now it's entrepreneurial. So Frank, let me help you understand that you've just given a lesson on entrepreneurship, and I don't want this to be lost on days. Um, Essentially, in entrepreneurship, we teach a couple of theories. Think like an owner. So when you go into a business and you're putting yourself in their position, think like an owner. If owner of this institution, what would I need? What would help? And looking for the pain point, you call it a pain point. We call it a problem. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers, right? So you find the problem and then you propose a solution to the problem. You identify your market, who specifically does this fit, and then you just it. So very, very entrepreneurial, although you call it a strategic partnership, very entrepreneurial. So you can go back and say, hey, I'm really an
Yeah.
entrepreneur out here. You can change your
Ernie
whole.
says I need a new title.
Yeah, I already said you could say that. That works well here at Jack Brown College. I don't know how it's going to work in your place, but here it's absolutely how to be thrown out if you say Ernie said. So
Yeah.
um, that's what we see, or that's what I'm hearing you
Wow.
say, which is amazing to have this applied to industry banking and helping people. That's so you're a problem solver. I like that a lot.
Well, thank you. And
So
I think about, we were talking about AI a little bit earlier before we started, this session. And, we all are facing this question of how do we beat AI, right? How do we keep our jobs as AI gets more and more sophisticated? But I think at the end of the day, what our advantage is to be human. And so we shouldn't seek to be more like the computers, be more like the AI. We should say, we can take in more data and we can identify problems, even if it's just as simple as meeting with like a business leader and realizing you seem exhausted. Happy, well-adjusted people are not as exhausted as you seem. So something's going on. And if it has something to do with your business, if there's some element in your business that is just dragging you down, maybe this is an opportunity to help you out, right? And to enter into some kind of a business relationship and serve your needs. And so, that's something that AI will never be able to do. So obviously you want to build up a certain level of technical expertise, but if you put all your eggs in the technical expertise basket, you'll lose to AI every time. But if you say, but what about being human and connecting with people and taking the time to hear them out and, ask good questions to get a sense of what's going on, that's when you're going to notice things that the computers never will.
Yeah. The empathy for the common man, I understand where you're going through. Being a psych entity, any thoughts or comments on emotions? Does that enter into your world at all? Being a people person that you are, because you're obviously a people person, Frank.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, yeah, no, the emotional intelligence, it's for instance, when I first entered into this role, sometimes I got a little over eager. And so I'd meet somebody and I immediately wanted to tell them all about what the credit union does. And that could be a real turnoff. People are like, whoa, like buy me dinner first. Okay. And so I realized, the most important thing that I can do is really connect on that human level, like you were talking about a moment ago, Ernie. And if I spend an hour or two with somebody and we never get to anything business related, but we've built some kind of a relationship, well, now we can talk again next week, or we can talk again next month, right? And that door is open. Or what I've seen a lot of is I will meet somebody and I might share a little bit about what we do. And they'll say, yeah, my school or my organization doesn't have that need. We don't have that problem. And I'll say, okay, that's fine. And a year later, they'll be like, hey, remember that thing that we were talking about a year ago? Well, now it's happening to us. And I remember you said that like there's something you can do. What was that thing you were saying? And so it's, no, as long as you keep those channels of communication open, you never know when the opportunity might resurface. And so, don't write people off. And also, don't try to close the door too quickly. Just kind of say, hey, I'm glad I was able to spend time with you. I'm glad I was able to get to know you. Thanks for sharing about what you do, about what your organization does. And then just keep that open. And that will stick in their mind. And if they know this is someone I can talk to, this is someone who will understand what I'm saying, this is someone who is going to, listen without judgment, right? Like, because there are people that, organizations that get themselves in really tight jams, and you could be like, well, that was dumb. Why did you do that? But obviously that's you're just making it worse. But to say, okay, that's tough, and that's where you are. So now let's figure out what it would look like to get you out of that rut and back on track.
Yeah, I think sometimes not trying to solve the problems, but being empathetic, creating the relationship, I think is huge. What you say, creating a relationship, and oftentimes we don't do that. Especially if you're in a sales role or you're out hunting business, you become predatory as opposed to relationship oriented. And sales at any level is a process. You're not going to kill them all in one day. And I don't want your business today. I want your business today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. So you have to create an environment where you become an asset and a person that you can just go to ask questions. Hey, Frank, I knew that you do, and you're in this thing, and I can't remember. And everybody's got a thing, right? So Frank, what was that thing? Tell me about that thing, Frank. I just remember you were a nice guy, and you didn't laugh at me when I told you my business was upside down. I don't know where to go. So fix it for me, Frank.
Right. That's exactly it. Yeah. Totally agree.
Yeah. Okay. I like it. Let me pause for a minute and open up to the floor and see if there's any questions that folks have while we're carrying on like a bunch of people. We forget about the folks that are listening contently. So any questions for Frank before we dive back in and talk about something ludicrous like AI? That was a conversation be recorded, by the way. So hearing none.
I'm gonna put my email address in the chat.
Okay. You know that you're opening yourself up for problems.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. So if anybody on here does want to talk to me at some point about, at least my experience in business development and banking, I'm willing to share my experience, and I'm not saying that what I'm saying is, true or relevant to you, but I'm always willing to share what it's been like for me.
Are you on LinkedIn as well, Frank? If people find you on LinkedIn, is that
I
okay?
am. Yeah, absolutely. Should I,
Okay.
here, let me see if I
All
can
right.
find my LinkedIn link.
It sounds to me as though there is sales, marketing, business development, they all overlap.
Yeah,
That's what it sounds like to me.
a multiple of talents.
They share a lot of
Yeah.
commonalities.
So, Frank, you have an opportunity to talk to MBA students. You're the guy out in industry, and these are the folks that are acquiring a degree for a variety of reasons, either promotions or find a job, move up. What's the advice coming from the field today in times of uncertainty?
Yeah.
What would you tell students? What's your advice? Wisdom of the world, Frank.
Okay, I'm trying. There was one of these like online meme quotes I saw it was really good, even though it's a little cheesy. It's like, just be yourself because everybody else is taken, or something to that effect. And I think, there can be a real temptation to be like, I want to be just like Ernie. Ernie's great, right? He seems so smart and he's
Nobody does
funny.
that. Nobody says that. No,
It's
Frank, stop.
hypothetical. It's
Okay,
hypothetical.
it's hyperbolic,
In
is what
an
it
in
is.
an in
That's
an alternate reality, somebody might say, I want to be just like Ernie, or somebody might say, I want to
yeah.
be just like Molly, right? Molly's so great. She always seems to be on top of things. And, I just want to be like her. And maybe your skill set is aligned with, that of Molly, or that of Ernest Ernie, excuse me. It says Ernest. Do you go by Ernest or Ernie?
Yeah, and I could fix it for you if you want. If you're a little ADHD, I'll fix it.
So, I would say it really helps to, who's the Mansons are waving. Is that for me, or is that for someone else?
I think
Oh, she's gone. She's out of here.
yeah.
Sorry,
She was
Karina.
she might have been saying goodbye. And so
Oh,
hello
okay.
and goodbye, Karina. I have I took a class with her as well. Okay, anyway, sorry. Let's go back to you.
Thank you. Yes, the ADHD is hitting hard.
Blowing,
So
blowing
knowing,
the entire train of thought here, Molly. Thank you so
gone.
much.
It's gone. So knowing who you are, and what your skills are, and being honest about that, and I would say, embracing that, because I think there's a temptation to think, the things that you're good at, you assume that everybody is good at, and then you look at things that other people are good at, and you're like, if only I was good at that, then everything would be better. Then I'd be successful.
Mhm.
But the reality is that what you're good at, everybody is not good at. Like that is patently false, and I know people, at our organization who, they think that their skill set is just very run of the mill. And I'm like, no, whenever I need project management help, I always go to you, because you always keep the trains running. I know that you will help me come up with a plan and a timeline and a budget. And so you are the person I turn to. And, this person's like, oh, that's not special. Everybody can do it. I'm like, are you kidding me? I couldn't project manage my way out of a wet paper bag. So,
Right.
taking the time, and talking to your peers in the program, talking to your professors, and just saying, like, what do you see in me, right? What abilities do you see in me? And then really owning that, and then looking for roles where you can, take that and run with it, instead of trying to be like somebody else, right? So if you're not like me, maybe business development isn't for you, or maybe you'll do business development in a very different way than how I do it, and that is 100% okay. And the longer you try to be like somebody else, the more time you're wasting, because you'll never be that other person, and you're just kind of spinning your wheels instead of embracing and growing in who you are. So I think, taking that time, and when you're in an MBA program or any kind of a master's program, it's an awesome time to step back and just evaluate, what am I interested in? What am I good at? Where do I seem to shine? And how do I do more of that? How do I bring that in service of a problem out there, right? Who might be out there in the world with a problem that I could solve, if I could get into a company where I had the chance to interact with those folks and actually help them address whatever that issue is that they have. I think that's the spot where you want to get to.
Yeah. Yeah. The phrase I like is somebody with less talent than you doing the job that you said you weren't qualified for. Right. So
Exactly.
we always have these excuses for why we can't do something, and I've habit in my career to try to find the magic, the people that have been successful, get close to them and understand that magic. What was the secret sauce? What helped him do that? And what I discovered is there is no magic. They just did it. They didn't quit. They just kept doing it.
Yeah.
Right? They're not magic. They're human. They have some talents here or there, what have you, but they just don't quit. Right? Doing it, they just don't quit.
Yeah.
So what's next for Frank? His careers at the bank? Is this your forever job? Oh, this may be a bad question to ask you, but I mean, what happens now?
Yeah, this is going on YouTube, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
It's going to be
yeah,
posted up live.
yeah.
So,
Well, I
in
actually
fact, we're
just
going
put
to
my
be
2 weeks
We're
in,
we're
so
recording.
just submitted my
just kidding.
resignation.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
No, so I would say that my goal at this point, and if my boss is watching, I hope he's paying close attention. No, we've I've taught, and actually, so another tip, if you have the kind of supervisor who will do this with you, it's really great to be able to say, where do you see me doing well in my job, and what is next? What do you see as being next for me? And it may be that what you see for yourself and what your supervisor sees for you is different, in which case maybe that's just a sign that your supervisor is like not paying attention, and that does happen.
Right. Yeah.
But in talking to my supervisor, my goal is, right now I'm doing a lot of the legwork myself. So last year I was like constantly on the road traveling and meeting with people, and I love it. But I have 4 young children at home, and so that was starting to wear on me and on my wife and my family. And so, my goal is to eventually be able to manage a team of people doing what I'm doing. And the thing about business development and sales is, if you hire people who are worth their salt and you have a good sense of what that market is that you're going after, each additional salesperson that you hire, they should be bringing in far more revenue to the organization than their salary. And so, yes, there's a payroll expense, but they're also generating new income, new business for the company. And so, my hope is that eventually I'd get to oversee a team of 3 or 4 or 5 people who are going out and working with these faith-based nonprofits and bringing more of them to the credit union, identifying the ones who have lending needs, just like that tuition financing thing that I talked about earlier, identifying, maybe there are other problems that other faith-based nonprofits experience that we just don't know about because we haven't talked to those people yet. And if we have people out in the field who are both trying to bring in business, but also trying to understand that landscape, they can bring back that intel that we can use to augment our listing of products and services. So I would love to oversee that sales team and start to pass on what I've learned, to people who are doing essentially what I'm doing now.
Yeah. I've done both. I've been outside sales. I've managed people. That's like herding cats. So good luck with that, Frank. I
at least want to try it,
feel,
and if I hate it, I'll
yeah,
do something
you
else.
should. Yeah,
I feel like he's talking to me. Okay, boss.
Yikes.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
You know that you travel too much if you have to wear a name tag at home so the kids know who you are.
Right.
That's the problem. So as long as you're not in a name tag status, then you're doing okay. But no, I totally feel the pain on that. So, all right, Molly, I probably reached the end of our time. We are close to the bottom of the hour. We can open it up for if we have any, or we can go ahead and zip this up and send it down the road.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. If anyone wants to go off of mute, you're welcome to ask your question now.
I don't have a question, but just my experience with credit unions. I will not go back to like B of A or anybody like that. And since I think 1992, when I was like 10, I've been with the same one, and it's in Loma Linda, so it's like a one horse town place. And they know who I am. They know who my kids are. They've seen my kids grow up from when they were babies. And whenever I need something, like I wrecked my car. I was doing home health and I wrecked my car. And as a nurse, I need to get back out there. My patients can't go without not being seen. And so I had put in my application and I was like, I can't even wait. So I called them and I said, I put in my application and I really need to get a car like today or tomorrow. And they said, well, how much do you need? And I was like, I don't know. And I threw out a number and they're like, okay, go get the car, bring us the yellow piece of paper, and then we'll give you a check and you can go pay for it. So I will never leave my credit union ever. And
That's awesome.
so when I do talk to my friends about a credit union, I'm like, you need to go because these credit
Yep.
basically, if you give them a plan, you sit down and talk to them, they might be able to help you do that plan.
That's been my experience too. I'm with a credit union as well, and I mean, you know, at the very least, the customer service is amazing that I've experienced, and just so I agree with you, Rochelle. Credit unions are great. So yeah, hey, it's a big credit union, you know, woo woo.
Credit
Big
Union
big
Love
love.
Fest.
Oh my God. Seriously. I never expected this one to be coming out of the woodwork, Frank. So there you go. Starting his own fan
So
club here at the NDA.
that's right.
Okay, well, I just wanted to thank you so much, Frank, for being here, and you know, especially because you know this all happened. We had a previous speaker scheduled, and it didn't work out, and Frank volunteered to participate last minute today, and it's been some really valuable information, some great insights. Really want to tell you that we appreciate your time. Thank you again for being here.
Well, thank you, Molly.
Yeah.
And it looks like Liza just asked, what's the difference between credit unions and regular banks? And really quick, I'll just say this. Credit unions are owned by the members. So when you join a credit union, you become a part owner of that cooperative, that financial cooperative. Whereas at a bank, you are a customer. And so banks are, you know, they're for-profit entities. They're trying to maximize their profit. And so, you know, how they serve their customers ultimately is a function of how much money they can make off of you. I mean, I'm sure they mean well. I'm sure there's some very nice banks out there, but it's kind of like they're looking to maximize their profit, and they do so by serving their customers. Whereas at a credit union, when you join, you become a part owner. You come to the annual meeting. You get to vote on things as part of, you know, the management of the credit union. Essentially, the staff at the credit union serves you. We are just tasked with the responsibility of stewarding your resources, and so it's a huge difference there. And there are instances where banks will just expel customers. They'll just say, you know what, you're not worth it. You know, maybe your balance is too low, or you know, whatever. You know, you're not worth it to us anymore. And so, you know, we're going to mail you whatever you had left in your account to whatever address we have on file. But at a credit union, there's like, you know, unless you go blow up a building, we can't just eject you from the credit union. You're a member for life, and you know, we have a responsibility to serve you. So I think that's a key difference.
Wow. I like it. Except for the blowing up the building part. Was a
No,
little
that's,
out
well,
there, but
Ernie, I'm saying that's a bad thing. Don't do it.
oh, okay.
And
Okay.
in
All
case I
right.
wasn't clear,
So,
that's
no,
that
note
was
to
meant to be a
self,
negative.
don't. Okay. I'm glad about that.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. It was so great to be with you this afternoon, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much.